Hello, 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 hello. All right, now we're cooking with gas. Hi. If you're a newcomer, my name is Kylie. If you're a returner, what's up? I'm so glad to have you back. I've somehow managed to watch a metric ass load of new movies without really even trying to, because I've been so extremely busy lately because if you're new here, I'm leaving for London literally tomorrow. So I've been doing a ton of work for that, like planning all my train tickets, planning all my COVID tests over here and over there, getting a bunch of medical stuff out of the way, hair appointments, nail appointments, whatever, all of that out of the way before I go. And also while making content and doing live streams, which have been so fun with you guys, by the way. The other day I streamed with my dad and we talked about big summer blockbusters like Jaws and Jurassic Park and the Terminator movies. So just so you guys know, I do have my movie club streams that I'm hopefully going to continue doing on YouTube, and then I also have a Twitch account. That's going to be more for more mellow, laid back kind of streams, but the movie stuff for now, I'm going to keep those live streams on YouTube, and thank you to everyone that has come by or watched those. Sorry, long intro, but the bottom line is I've simply already watched way too many movies this month. I think I've already watched 24 movies and one TV show, I believe. And today, as of right now, it's June 16th when I'm filming this. That's really intense. I didn't even realize that I had done this. But yeah, that's what's happening today. Also, I'm stoned. I feel like you probably could have gathered that by now, but just had to clear the air. This should be closer. Hello, can you hear me now? Sorry, really weirdly long intro, but there's just a lot going on with me right now. So let us discuss the first movie that I watched in June, and that would be the Poughkeepsie Tapes. This came out in 2007, and it is a found footage movie. When hundreds of videotapes show torture, murder, and dismemberment are found in an abandoned house, they reveal a serial killer's decade-long reign of terror and become the most disturbing collection of evidence homicide detectives have ever seen. I gave this movie 1 star, and in my review, I said y'all need to stop recommending movies where the main horror element is just gratuitous violence against women. You know what? That could probably be all I need to say right there. I'm just not really, interested in movies that are about that. And also, to be honest, I don't really understand why this movie has the reputation that it does, because I didn't even feel like it was super believable. And I love found footage. That's one of my favorite subgenres of all time, but it just really did not sell it for me at all. So anyways, I am just gonna move right along to the next movie, which is actually 17 again. Just really had a hankering for an early 2000s comedy, I guess, but I was not ready for it. 30-something Mike O'Donnell wishes he could have a do-over, and that's exactly what he gets when he wakes up one morning to find he's 17 years old again. With his adult mind stuck inside the body of a teenager, Mike actually has the chance to reverse some decisions he wishes he never made. Alright, I gave this movie 2 stars, and there's definitely a possibility that that's a little bit too generous. All I said in my review was fever dream, and I don't really know how else to describe it, because when you have Jan from The Office speaking in Elvish in a movie, and when you have scenes of a daughter very aggressively coming on to her father,
I'm a hungry lioness, and you're a baby gazelle. Maggie, no, Maggie, stop. Yes! Maggie, stop it. Okay.
You know that something went wrong somewhere along the way. There's also just a lot of very blatant isms that we don't like to talk about, like racism and sexism and all those things. This movie's got them. The most glaring of them all, probably the fact that Zac Efron's character was trying to get his son laid while simultaneously trying to keep his daughter celibate, and his daughter was older than his son. So, just not the most progressive film. And also, Zac Efron is a good actor. Stop putting him in bad movies. Anyways, that was a movie that I adored when I was younger, when it came out, but mostly just because I was in love with Zac Efron, let's be real. I mean, weren't we all though? I would not recommend watching it. Most of it is not even really funny, so. The next one is a rewatch for me, and that would be Teen Wolf, that came out in 1985, starring the lovely Michael J. Fox, of course. When a shy teenager's newfound powers help him score at basketball, and with the popular girls, he has some pretty hairy decisions to make. The synopsis, oh my god. This is a 3.5-star movie for me. I really do love it. It's so dumb, but the werewolf practical effects are honestly pretty fun. Like, I don't mind them. And the movie seems like it's trying to say a lot while really saying almost nothing at all. It's kind of supposed to be like a feel-good, ooh, we learned a lesson about self-acceptance while watching this movie. It's trying to be on that type of beat, but a lot of it is just like not earned, and then it makes the more dramatic moments all the more enjoyable because they're so bad. And I just love Michael J. Fox. I love that little man. Back to the Future is one of my favorite movies of all time. In the interest of keeping things moving, I'm gonna be moving on to the next movie, which is The Lost Boys. Classic vampire movie from 1987. This was one that you guys recommended that I watch as part of Pride Month. A mother and her 2 teenage sons move to a seemingly nice and quiet small coastal California town, yet soon find out that it's overrun by bike gangs and vampires. A couple of teenage friends take it upon themselves to hunt down the vampires that they suspect of a few mysterious murders and restore peace and calm to their town. So this movie was recommended for Pride Month because a lot about the vampires is like very queer coded, and I definitely picked up on it. Some of the subtext though that went into that queer coding of the vampires was just a little bit complicated, but the main reason why this movie got 3.5 stars from me is because it just embodies the 80s so well. It was really reminiscent of Pumpkinhead to me for some reason, just like a really classic kind of a B movie. It just very much had the vibe of 80s cult classic. And I think the main reason I said this is because I couldn't believe how campy and absurd the ending of the movie was. I loved it. I was still in the mood for like campy 80s mystical type stuff after watching Teen Wolf, and it did not disappoint, definitely not. The next movie did though. Yeah, that would be Chernobyl Diaries from 2012. A group of 6 tourists looking to go off the beaten path hire an extreme tour guide who, ignoring warnings, takes them into the city of Pripyat, the former home to the workers of the Chernobyl nuclear reactor, but now a deserted town since the disaster more than 25 years earlier. After a brief exploration of the abandoned city, the group members find themselves stranded, only to discover that they are not alone. This movie was so bad. It was so bad. I gave it 1 star, and also worth noting is that this movie stars Jesse McCartney. They just included basically almost every single early 2000s dumb, tropey cliche in the movie. And also, one of the main horror elements is these creatures that are after them, or these like radioactive people. I don't know exactly what they were supposed to be. Ooh. And yet, even though they are the main horror element, you never end up seeing them, which arguably, no, it's not. I don't think this is arguable. I'm right about this. Seeing the weird nuclear radioactive animals would have been the best part of this movie because the characters are so trash. It's so bad. I feel like some people might think this movie is one of those ones that's like so bad it's good and it's kind of a fun time. But for me, the entertainment value was just not there because it was so ridiculously cliched to like the point of exhaustion, you know, not even to the point of like, oh, haha, there's that trope. Oh, there's that trope. It was so much, and then they didn't show the animals that would have probably looked really weird and gross, would have been the best part, and yet. So yeah, 1 star. It's bad. Characters suck. You hate them. It's not good. Moving on to a movie that was also really bad. That was Ted. Probably don't need to read the synopsis. This is just, you know, the movie where Mark Wahlberg has a living teddy bear. I give this movie 2 stars, and the movie did do all the things that I thought would have been funny if you had an adult living teddy bear. Like, he gets drunk, he smokes weed, it's really funny, but a lot of the humor in the movie is just, it really has not aged well. And this came out just in 2012, but it's a Mark Wahlberg movie, so I don't know what I expected. And I don't know why I thought it was gonna be funny, because this is something that I found funny, I think, when I was like 13 years old, the year that it came out. And now I'm like, my God, what is this? So yeah, anyways, moving on, I watched Bo Burnham Inside. He's a comedian, he does stand-up specials, and he self-produced this stand-up, and it all took place in one location. And it's brand new on Netflix right right now. It's one of the most uniquely shot things that I've ever seen, and so for that reason I respect it. I gave it 3.5 stars because it was something that was entirely new, and it also was very powerful. Like, some of the notes that he hit about mental health really hit home for me, and I did relate to it in a lot of ways. But also, I only gave it 3.5 stars because I actually did have kind of some major issues with it. It felt kind of just pretentious and fake to me because apparently he like lived in this studio and was in this studio for the whole pandemic or whatever. But like, he lives with his girlfriend, I'm pretty sure, and he is a millionaire comedian, just had his huge acting breakout role in Promising Young Woman. The man is a millionaire. I know he lives in a house. I know he probably went home to his girlfriend every day after making this. And that's not to discredit the moments where he broke down on camera, because that did feel very real to me. It's just kind of the lack of self-awareness, I feel like, for where he's coming from making this. Because in the very beginning, he talks about like, oh, I'm a white man, like, should I probably just shut up and not make jokes about this right now? And then later in the special, he kind of proceeds to ask like, doesn't anyone ever shut up, ever, blah, 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 blah. And a lot of the humor felt really, really outdated. And I don't just mean that because he was making this in 2020 over the course of that year, but a lot of the humor feels like it would have been funny back in like 2015, 2016, like back like early 2010s, because there's a song that's fully dedicated to white women's Instagrams, which I don't like take offense to or anything. It's just that the kind of styles and aesthetics he was showing were very like 2013, 2014. So I was like, this is not really current. Like, I don't know any white women whose Instagram actually looked like what he was doing. And the whole thing just felt very woe is me. I know it was supposed to be like trying to be relatable, but the most that I related to about the special is that it kind of like triggered my experience and made me kind of feel like I was reliving the pandemic. That was really the only way I connected with it. That was kind of all that I got out of it. And the rest of it just felt really fake. So yeah, credit where it's due that it is a very original piece of art, but I think that I just like maybe don't agree with his thought process on a lot of things with this. Anyways, that took up way too much time. So up next is one of my favorite movies, Kingsman: The Secret Service, that came out in 2014. The story of a super secret spy organization that recruits an unrefined but promising street kid into the agency's ultra-competitive training program just as a global threat emerges from a twisted tech genius. I gave this movie 4.5 stars and a little heart. This is my favorite action movie of all time. I hadn't rewatched it in a couple of years at this point. I think it had been like 2 years. And I was a little bit worried. I tried to manage my expectations because I was like, oh, it's probably not as good as I remember. But I think that it was. Like, it was missing the shock value on the rewatch that made it so funny the first time, but I still found it just as thoroughly entertaining. Like, this is a movie that I will rewatch till the day that I die. So enough said. Up next, I rewatched A Quiet Place as well, which I gave 5 full stars and a heart. I very, very, very rarely give things 5 full stars and a heart, but I definitely struggled trying to find a single flaw of that movie, and that is something that my dad and I talked about over on Twitch. We did a live stream talking about both the Quiet Place movies. Up next, maybe we could spend a little bit more time on this one, is Saint Maud. This is a weird one. Having recently found God, self-efficating young nurse Maud arrives at a plush home to take care of Amanda, a hedonistic dancer left frail from a chronic illness. When a chance encounter with a former colleague throws up hints of a dark past, it becomes clear there is more to Sweet Maud than meets the eye. So Saint Maud, I feel like, is somewhat of a polarizing movie. I don't even know if that many people have seen it, but it's an A24 movie, so inherently there are going to be a good amount of people that aren't into it. But I gave it 3.5 stars. I really, really liked it, and in my review, I said, weird. Compels me though. Also, it's beautiful and has a powerful score. But yeah, it's hard to kind of put my feelings into words beyond that. It was a really beautiful and really well-made movie, and I really appreciated it. I loved the style of it, which I talked about in my review of Conjuring 3. And like I said, the score was really phenomenal. I thought it was really quite haunting and beautiful. Definitely highly recommend that one, at least for a one-time watch. There are some really good twists and surprises in that movie. I was a fan of the story. I thought it was very, very interesting. Up next, oh, I feel a little bit bad about this one. So, A Quiet Place Part 2, that came out just a couple of weeks ago. Following the events at home, the Abbott family now face the terrors of the outside world. Forced to venture into the unknown, they realize that the creatures that hunt by sound are not the only threats that lurk beyond the sand path. We talked at length about this movie in my live stream on Twitch with my dad. He joined me for that conversation, and I gave this movie 3 stars, and I know that's kind of disappointing for a lot of people because a lot of people really loved this sequel. I just was not really crazy about it. I think it definitely has some amazing, great, spectacular moments that are just, cinema, but a lot of the movie is also just filler and not a lot going on. And it's also just quite predictable. There was nothing that really shocked me too much about the movie, and also not once did I ever feel scared for our characters. It felt like a very low stakes situation, and so then that just kind of made me a little bit bored. Ooh. I still really liked it though. I thought that it was a decent sequel. Like, I wasn't mad about it. It just didn't do for me what it's apparently doing for everybody else. I don't know why. Hi, I'm editing, and I just remembered the main reason why I liked the movie but like didn't love it by any means. It's because the plot only moved along when characters would make the most mind-numbingly stupid decisions. That was so frustrating because in the previous movie, they all acted with intelligence. The son had been mildly problematic before, but it was nothing that I couldn't excuse because like he was a kid. But some of the actions of this movie were just inexcusable. Like, if you could get past the fact that they were acting so dumb, then you would probably love the movie. Moving on though to an excellent movie, and that would be The Sixth Sense. Of course, directed by M. Night Shyamalan and came out the year that I was born, 1999. A psychological thriller about an 8-year-old boy named Cole Sear who believes he can see into the world of the dead. A child psychologist named Malcolm Crowe comes to Cole to help him deal with his problem. This is a movie that I had to give 4 stars because not only does it really hold up to today's standards, but also because this is one of the best child acting performances I've ever seen in my entire life. And again, I'm sorry, I just have to read what I wrote on Letterboxd because I kind of feel like it sums up all of my feelings about the movie in a pretty concise statement. Haley Joel Osment had so much talent at 10 years old, it's like there was the soul of a wise old man inside of him, speaking all of his dialogue for him. I stand by that, and a lot of people agreed with me on that one. I really think that he carries the movie, and this is one of the most serious acting performances by Bruce Willis for sure, and it's great. Even on a rewatch, when you know the big twist ending, it just kind of recontextualizes so much of the movie, and it makes it so eerie, but like in a different way, which is just wonderful that no matter if you know the twist ending or not, it's still a great movie. This is a movie that I know gets a lot of hype, and I do really think that it is earned. I hadn't watched it since I was, I think, probably in like 6th grade, so I was like 11, and it was still honestly just as good and almost as shocking this time around at 21 years old, which is 10 years later. It's wonderful on a rewatch. It's just a really good movie. And enough said there. Up next, I watched Spiral, which was another Pride Month recommendation. A couple moved to a small town so they can enjoy a better quality of life and raise their 16-year-old daughter with the best social values. But nothing is as it seems in their picturesque neighborhood. And when Malik sees the folks next door throwing a very strange party, something very shocking has got to give. The thing is, though, when he sees what's happening next door, it makes it very clear exactly what the twist is going to be. The movie doesn't really end up going beyond that too much, although I will say that the ending 20 minutes, despite more or less knowing what was coming, it still ended up being pretty shocking, and I really liked the ending of the movie and the twist with how they wrapped things up. What I don't like, though, is there's definitely a lack of intersectionality. So the lead actor is black, and on Letterboxd, I've just seen people complain that I'm assuming are also black. Like, some of the reviews say things like, the lead character is black, but he makes all the decisions of a dumb, stereotypical white horror movie character, or things like that. Which is true, because the lead character is not really sensible at all, and he's like the only black guy in the movie, and yet race is not something that ever comes up, and yet the movie is pretty centered on like queer pain. And this is a review that I wanted to read off because I did agree with this. I would have given it points for being queer if the movie didn't revolve around queerness being an issue. Just give us LGBTQIA+ marginalized characters where their sexual orientations aren't a plot device. That's what I'm saying. Like, everything doesn't have to be about gay pain when we're dealing with a marginalized group on screen. So that was one of the major downfalls of the movie, and I'm kind of surprised that it was recommended to me for Pride Month because it just centers on like queer pain. And I don't even know if the actors or the writers or whatever, if any of them were gay. I think it was just recommended to me because there is a gay couple in the movie. Not really sure, because the message there was extremely muddy. In the ending though, they kind of like backtrack on it, and I feel like the ending of the movie is kind of worth it for the build-up. It's hard to say, but like, I'm glad that I watched it. I think it's a good one-time watch. I just have conflicting feelings about it. Oh, we still have 12 more movies to talk about. Goodness. Up next is a movie called Afflicted, and I watched this on Amazon Prime. Two friends' tour of Europe take a dark turn when one of them contracts a mysterious illness. They race to find out what it is and how to cure it before the sickness consumes him completely. So this movie takes a twist on a very old and tired genre, and I'm not going to say what that genre is because if I do, it kind of spoils what goes on in the movie. And I thought that it was well made. It was really interesting. It was a found footage movie, but I did only give it 3 stars. Despite it being effectively shocking, and I think the acting was pretty good, and it was really well made because the conceit of the movie is like they're documentarians that are filming it. Or no, I'm sorry, only one of the friends is a documentarian, and so he's like documenting the whole trip. The movie was just a little bit too gross for me at times. There is a very shocking amount of puking that happens in this movie. I do not do well with that. It makes me feel queasy when other people throw up. And to be honest, that is one of the reasons why I had to knock off some stars. It was just a little bit too gross for me and kind of reliant on that gross shock value, which is just not my thing. But you know, it's a good one-time watch. It's something unique if you feel like you need something new, something fresh to watch. Moving on though, the next thing I watched was The Conjuring, The Devil Made Me Do It, but I made a whole review of that movie, so if I remember, I'll try to link that down below. And also, a lot of people really liked my intro for that video, and I liked it too. I was kind of proud of that. But I whipped together that intro in like 10 minutes, and you guys really liked it, so I'm gonna try to do stuff like that more often when I can. But yeah, check that out. Not gonna talk about my thoughts about it here. Up next is a movie that I watched that is called 12 Monkeys. It's another one that's directed by Terry Gilliam. I watched his movie Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas last month, and it made my list of top 5 movies of the month. So 12 Monkeys, if you haven't heard of it. In the year 2035, convict James Cole reluctantly volunteers to be sent back in time to discover the origin of a deadly virus that wiped out nearly all of the Earth's population and forced the survivors into underground communities. But when Cole is mistakenly sent to 1990 instead of 1996, he's arrested and locked up in a mental hospital. So I'm not going to read the rest of the synopsis on Letterboxd because I kind of feel like it gives away some of the good plot twists. I gave it 3.5 stars, and on Letterboxd I said it's absolutely mental that they waited so long to give Brad Pitt an Oscar for his acting. Because it's just true. His performance in that movie was so weird. I thought it was phenomenal. There might be some critiques to be made about the way that they depict mental illness and such, but the acting was really on point, and him just really aggressively flipping everyone off all the time for no reason was such a mood. Anyways, on another note, I feel like any Terry Gilliam film, it's just required that you be really stoned to watch them, because that's what I did. I watched it with my friend Robert, and we split an edible, and like, I felt like I was elsewhere. The way that the future is depicted in a movie that came out in 1995 is obviously like really weird, but I think the movie is pretty effective. It's definitely really trippy. We travel around a lot, obviously, because he's like time jumping the entire time, and ultimately the ending wasn't super rewarding, and it wasn't like this big climactic moment because I kind of did see it coming from a ways away, but the style of it is just really unique. This is yet another, I think, fairly decent and serious performance by Bruce Willis, and the story is definitely worth following. Like, this is a really good one-time watch if you're into kind of weird, trippy action adventure type stuff. Moving on to Population 436, which is a movie that they just added to Netflix. A census taker is sent to investigate why a certain small town has had the same population, 436 residents, for the last 100 years. I gave this movie 2.5 stars, which feels just like a little bit too high. It's probably more around the 2-star range, but I kind of do feel like it's earned because I thought that the story of it was great. The plot I thought was consistently really good, and for the obviously small budget they had, I thought the director worked with it really, really well and, you know, did everything they could. But at the end of the day, I just feel like they really did need a bigger budget. They needed slightly bigger actors for these really dramatic roles that these actors in the movie that were unknown to me just didn't really sell it super well. And I don't think the movie was quite as grand as the story could have allowed it to be if they had a bigger budget. So all I said in my review too is the story is great, they just needed a bigger budget. And that's really all I have to say. Like, I kind of, is it worth watching though? I know your time is precious, so I'm like, do I recommend this one? If you have the time, I think that the story is worth watching. It's just kind of frustrating because you know it could be a lot better, like the whole time you're watching it. So I'm gonna move on now to Goodnight Mommy. This is a German movie that came out in 2014. In the heat of the summer lays a lonesome house in the countryside where 9-year-old twin brothers await their mother's return. When she comes home, bandaged after a cosmetic surgery, nothing is like before, and the children start to doubt whether this woman is actually who she says she is. This is the one that I gave a solid 3 stars to. It was worth watching, and I do recommend it, but it's just not one of my favorites. I did take note that the movie feels a little bit lifeless, despite I think the story being really, really good, and it actually has kind of an M. Night Shyamalan-esque twist to it. I also noted that the pacing is pretty slow. It is a slow burn, which is something that I don't mind because I found the story to be really interesting. However, I wanted the acting performances to give me a little bit more. They felt a little bit bland, which I just need a little bit more from the acting if the pacing is slow, but that could just be me. I think it's definitely worth a one-time watch, especially to kind of expand your palette. It's an amazing German movie. So definitely check it out. It is free to watch on Tubi if you are in the US. I know you don't have it in the UK. Apologies. That same day, I watched Cruella, which is the new live-action Disney movie. This is basically just like the origin story of Cruella. I don't really need to read off a synopsis, but I gave this 4.5 stars because we've gotten some great movies this year, but really that was the most fun that I have had probably this entire year. I mean, I had a lot of fun with Godzilla vs. Kong, but in Cruella, I felt like the story was stronger, so I'm gonna go with Cruella. I think I had more fun with Cruella. But in my review, I did say it's The Devil Wears Prada featuring Harley Quinn, I guess. And I pointed out that they actually have a few of the Suicide Squad songs in their soundtrack, but it was still such a fun time. I thought it was so fun for that reason, honestly, because it felt like it wasn't taking itself too seriously. Yes, people are pointing out the CGI dogs are bad. They are bad, okay? They're not, in no way are they good, but the movie was still really enjoyable, and honestly, like, the CGI dogs and maybe one of the characters being a little bit too caricature-y for me, that tells me those parts of the movie are kind of more for kids, even though I think it's rated like PG-13, but you know, kids will still watch it because it's Disney and people will take their kids to go see it, which I think it's a perfectly fine movie for kids, but I did kind of talk about that movie at length with my dad over on Twitch before we talked about the A Quiet Place movies, so I'm gonna move on. Of these next 2 movies though, we talked about so much in our last live, so I maybe just go watch my live because I watched The Terminator and The Terminator 2 Judgment Day, which The Terminator I gave 4 stars and Judgment Day I gave 4.5 stars. I talked about them so much already. I don't know if I have any more original thoughts to offer. I just really, really, really love both of those movies. Like, the Terminator franchise is probably one of my favorites. I haven't rewatched the rest of the franchise yet though, and I think there are 1 or 2 movies from it that I still haven't seen, the newer ones, but I love those first 2 movies to death. I know that for sure. So I think enough said. I'm gonna move on to the next thing I watched, which was a show, and that is Loki, the new show on Disney Plus, and I think that only 2 episodes have aired as of right now. After stealing the Tesseract during the events of Avengers Endgame, an alternate version of Loki is brought to the mysterious Time Variance Authority, a bureaucratic organization that exists outside of time and space and monitors the timeline. They give Loki a choice: face being erased from existence due to a time variant, or help fix the timeline and stop a greater threat. Honestly, I do want to save my thoughts on this one because there's a chance that I might do an entire series review on Loki. I love it so much. I gave it 5 stars and a heart because I think it is truly the best Marvel show that has come out to this date. There are so many people that are like so butthurt and are complaining so much about the fact that it has to do with time. People are complaining that because this has to do with time, and because time and the whole timeline is controlled by these beings or whatever at the Time Variance Authority, they're all mad and they're saying, okay, so, oh my god, like all of the choices that the Avengers made were all pointless because they're all part of some grand design. They didn't actually have free will and whatever. All the characters still have free will. The Time Variance Authority just like arrests people when they deviate from the timeline they want to create. So the people with that complaint are just like not correct. So that's why I think it's such a dumb complaint, because I think the show and the concept is so good. And every time that I think that Marvel can't really up the stakes anymore or think of new ideas anymore, they just do. So I love it. I cannot wait to watch episode 2, which comes out tonight. But hopefully I can do like a live Twitch stream maybe, because I know it's not horror, but I want to do like a whole live Twitch stream where I just talk about everything having to do with that season of the show. So maybe let me know if you're interested in that down below. But moving on, I watched the Evil Dead remake from 2013. I'm gonna read the synopsis because it is a little bit different to the original. Mia, a young woman struggling with sobriety, heads to a remote cabin with a group of friends where the discovery of the Book of the Dead unwittingly summons up dormant demons which possess the youngsters one by one. So I gave this movie 2 stars, but that feels just a little bit generous, to be honest. I wanted to give it more of like a 1, but I do have to give credit where it is due. I think the effects and like the gore are really good, and they're all practical, which is really impressive considering it was 2013. We were definitely well into the peak of like CGI in horror and just in movies in general at that time. So I do really commend them for going with practical effects, and they are very updated and they look really good, and they're very disgusting. I'm not a fan of gore, but like I can appreciate good practical effects when I see them, of course. But in my oh my god, in my review I wrote, no, don't cut your arm off, you're so sexy. Okay, if you've seen the movie, you know. I'm not gonna really comment on that further, but I didn't really like it. It was so cheesy, and the scares were so bad, and they are very reminiscent of like early 2010s, and I do kind of love that style of horror. I don't mind all those weird tropes and cliches and like super cheesy stuff, because I really like that era of horror, and it's kind of reminiscent of like Insidious, but it was so bad. It was a very bad movie, to be honest. I do also want to commend it though, because it is very different to the original, which is also a movie that I don't like. I know that's a hot take apparently. I don't know, 80s horror is like very hit or miss for me, but the remake was no good. I think that the original is probably a lot better than the remake, to be honest, but I haven't watched the original in quite a while. It's definitely been like over a year since I first saw it, so I don't know. Remake bad. Up next was a movie that took me 2 days to finish, and that would be Interview with the Vampire. This is another one that I watched in the spirit of Pride Month because it is very queer-coded. A vampire relates his epic life story of love, betrayal, loneliness, and dark hunger to an over-curious reporter. So this movie obviously had to give this one a watch. It has Tom Cruise and Brad Pitt as these long-haired vampires. Enough said, right? But this style of movie just was really not for me. It's definitely more of a romance horror, and this movie luckily did not feel as confused with its queer subtext like it definitely was very apparent. Even in my review I said it's giving me theater, specifically Shakespeare, down to the details like how gay it is while not being gay enough. So it's weird because they do take it pretty far and you can tell what the subtext is, but they never take it far enough to the point where it's no longer subtext and actually becomes like the subject matter of what we're watching, which feels like that's what we deserve. Even some people on Letterboxd are saying like, I had no idea this movie was basically about a gay Tom Cruise and Brad Pitt raising their lesbian daughter, but here we are. I don't know if I would go that far, but to be honest, that does kind of feel like what happened. So it's just really weird. I don't really know what to make of this movie. I gave it 2 stars because I just really didn't enjoy it. Also, they romanticize the relationship between Brad Pitt's character and his slaves, which is just really touchy subject matter that I feel like the only way to respect it is to depict it accurately, which this did not do in the slightest. The relationship with him and his head slave with this woman was like very romantic, and she cared for him really deeply. And then at one point he like set all of his slaves free just because, and it's like, that doesn't seem quite right, you know? Kind of feels like whitewashing history just a little bit, you know? So was not a super big fan of that movie. It took me 2 days to finish because I just really wasn't that interested in it. And I know that that's like a cult classic, so sorry. Up next, and the last movie I'm going to talk about today, sheesh, that would be Jurassic Park from 1993. I don't need to read the synopsis, right? Because I feel like any horror fan worth their salt has seen this movie. I gave it 5 stars and a heart. I can't really find the flaws with that movie, to be honest. It's one of the most rewatchable adventure action horror movies I've ever seen. I've loved it ever since I was a little kid. We also talked about that one at length in my last live, so definitely, again, watch that live stream. It's a very special movie that is near and dear to my heart, so we're ending on a really good note here. And there's just not much else to say. All I said on my Letterboxd review was the impact. And that's it, you know, enough said. So that's gonna do it for all the movies I'm gonna talk about today. It feels really weird that I'm gonna be posting this and like not knowing when I'll be able to film my next video. And we'll just have to see. I will keep you posted. I will try to be active on social media, and I love interacting with you guys, so definitely follow me over on like Twitter and Instagram and Letterboxd and all that good stuff. That'll all be linked down below, as well as my vlog channel, which is where I'm going to be documenting all of my adventures, so definitely follow me over there so you can keep up. And my Patreon is down there as well, which I have been slowly releasing all of my reactions to the Saw movies over there, and that's only $5 a month. So yeah, I think that does it for today. I hope that you enjoyed this video, and I hope I catch you in the next one. Bye!